The sound of ocean surf, of waves, a natural sound most people find pleasing and relaxing. It is a sound of natural energy, a natural energy always present when the ocean meets the shore. The sound of waves of energy in action.
Okay, what is CIA manifestation? And why should you try it? Great question, you might ask. No, it's not going to make you want to overthrow any governments. No, it's not going to make you steal secrets. But if you want, like, decent meditation, this could be it for you. Okay, so how did I find out about this random thing? I was very bored one day and I was reading declassified files from CIA Reading Room, very good resource. Reading those as every person does, right? And I stumbled upon this thing called the Gateway Experience. I'm gonna make sure I get it all right here. So, the name alone made me think Subnautica or sci-fi, right? Like it's that vibe. But that's not what it was. I read it and it was a real thing. Now, to be clear, it's not the CIA that started it. It is the Monroe Institute, which is an independent group that does research into this sort of thing. Brain activity, meditation, all of that. And the CIA gets involved, looks into it, and produces this report, which is the first thing that I saw declassified. So, why does the CIA care about this experience that a random institute has created? Well, it all starts in the 80s when the institute creates it and the CIA begins looking at it. So, it turns out the training they developed was focused on the mind. As I said, Morrow Institute, it's all about the brain, okay? So, the experience, the gateway experience, is essentially a series of sounds meant to get a person from focus 1 to focus 21, the highest level of focus in their experience. The sounds are very complicated, but essentially it's different sounds in your right and your left ear, and they're meant to sync up eventually. They don't sync up at first. What they do is they use different sounds in your left and your right ear, apparently use it to create certain outputs in your brain that then make your brain try and reason between the two different sounds, make them coherent within your brain, and in doing so, increase your brain output, your awareness, and your focus. Hence, the Morrow Institute describing the experience in terms of focuses 1 to 21, because that's the progression of how focused you get using it. So this process of left and right ear, different sounds, using your brain, is called Hemi-Sync, and that's how they describe it in a manual that's actually been declassified as well. It's available on Internet Archive, very useful resource. So that's out there if you want to know how this works. And even better, the tapes are on Spotify. Crazy, right? Okay, so I've described the vague idea. Hemicyclical sound meant to focus your brain. Okay, so what is it exactly? Like, what do you do for it? The reason that people do it is supposedly, and I'll quote from them here, it is to move out of the physical sphere and ultimately escape the restrictions of time and space. This is all according to a report released in 2003. That's that CIA report. So it's big objectives, like the ideas behind it are pretty big, even though the techniques are fundamentally meditation. Like, let's be real. I'm not trying to hate on the party here, but it is meditation. But it's fun, because they have high ambitions for it. So, let's get my very non-scientific history student self to try and explain some of the context of why this experience was created in the first place. So as I said, the ideas go a whole lot further. It's all about energy, and the energy your brain uses and the energy in your brain outputs. So, why would you want this higher awareness? I'm going to consult some notes here, because otherwise I'll get very confused. So, the way they put it in the manual and in the CA's report on it is essentially this. Physics defines time as a measurement of energy or force in motion. In other words, time is a measurement of change. Energy must be limited in motion and be in a specific location. Makes sense? Energy which is not confined is force without limit, which is infinite. It is infinity. That infinite energy is a fundamental and primal force of existence without form that's described by the creators of this idea as the absolute. So this is where it gets really wacky. I mean, what's the absolute? Sounds like some sci-fi deity. It's kind of what it is. So they say that between the absolute, that infinite energy, and the material universe which we inhabit, are intervening dimensions which human consciousness can reach at certain levels of focus. Hence, focus is 1 to 21. You're trying to get closer and closer to the absolute, is the idea. So, theoretically, human consciousness may continue to expand the horizons of its perceptual capability all the way until the dimension of the absolute, until which point perception stops, because the absolute generates. This is where it gets really, really strange. Okay, so theoretically, human consciousness may continue to expand the horizons of its perceptual capabilities, our ability to perceive stuff, until it reaches that dimension of the absolute at the very end. And at this point, that's where the perception stops, because the absolute generates nothing about itself. Like, the absolute is the end-all be-all. So at that point, human perception does not matter. And the way they describe it is as the universe as a sort of giant hologram of energy created by the absolute. So they say everything we see is a hologram of energy, because energy is not static, and that's what everything's made of. And they describe the total universal hologram as the torus. Crazy, but that's what a scientist called Bentov calls it. But it's pretty interesting, right? Like, that's what the context behind this whole idea is. So, to break down the objective of this specific experience a lot better, Melissa Yeager, who's the chief scientific officer at the Monroe Institute at this time, described it perfectly as it being a lamp versus a laser, right? So a lamp, like this little lamp, shines light everywhere, right? It's helpful. But a laser shines light in a hyper-specific location. I haven't got a laser on hand. Should have prepared better, but yeah. Lamp is your normal mind. Laser is your focused mind with the gateway experience. So you kind of see how they've got this idea the universe is giant. Endless energy. Okay, so to break down the specific objectives of this experience within that context, there's a good example from Melissa Yeager, who was the chief scientific officer at the Monroe Institute at the time this was all going on, and she describes it as your normal brain is like a lamp, right, shining light everywhere. Your brain, with the focus of the gateway experience, is like a laser. The focus brings you clarity, brings you the ability to see more, to focus more. Fundamentally, that's what it's all about. So, to achieve this, they use sound. More specifically, the Hemi-Sync. Now, what is the specific type of sound? It's called frequency following response, or FFR. So that means if the subject, a participant, maybe you, hears a sound at a specific frequency that emulates the sounds in their brain, the brain will try to mimic that same frequency by adjusting its brainwave output. So, you're trying to mimic the frequency, your brain changes using it. The difference between the two ears, so sound in one ear, different sound in the other, your brain tries to rationalize it. The idea of this whole thing is to bring the subject to a higher state of awareness and a higher state of output by making the brain put those two sounds into coherence within itself. Sorry, I do have to check notes because this thing is incredibly confusing. So, once you've done all that, the participant is encouraged to make use of the heightened brain activity with different activities, practical experiments, stuff that involves problem solving and patterning, which is the concentration of on a desired objective whilst in a focused state. Hence where the manifestation idea comes in, You haven't really seen it until now, but this is sort of part of it. There's some really interesting ones, and this is where it gets crazy. So, 1. Color breathing, designed to bring the expanded awareness into use by imagining various colors in a particularly intense and vivid manner. 2. Energy bar tool. So this is part of the CIA manual, which references magic wands and enhanced scepters of folklore. In this case, the technique involves envisaging a small, intense, pulsating dot of light in front of you as your eyes are closed, using the sound. So this all goes on as you're using the sound, to be clear. So, a small pulsating dot of light. The participant imagines there's an intense amount of energy within the light. They focus on it until it brights in their mind. Same thing as the colour perception, you're trying to make things come alive in your own mind. Then there's remote viewing, which is using that previous tool, energy bar tool, crazy, for initiating different techniques. So they turn that tool to a whirling vortex through which they send their imagination. So you send your perception through a vortex in search of new ideas. That's the whole thing, right? There's no specific objective. The objective is enhanced brain function. Then there's a living body map, which uses all the previous tools, but specifically the energy bar tool, as a means of healing specific areas of your body. Crazy, I know. So, all of these techniques that I've just listed are conducted at Focus 12. So, Focus 1 to 21, Focus 12 is where those techniques lie. However, there are more focuses that go further. And there's a focus which supposedly allows the participant to envisage the future using Focus 15. But it says that less than 5% of all participants will ever achieve actual Focus 15, at least within 7 days of training, which is the normal amount. It goes even further, all the way. So future is the hardest, and the future focus goes the hardest at 21, Focus 21. The document states that except in unusual circumstances, it's not possible to attain this unless you've had years or serious months of practicing the gateway experience. So Focus 21, essentially envisaging the future. That's pretty much it. So the conclusions of the CIA report, released in 2003 about all of this, involved making use of these methods, encouraging advanced participants to build holographic patterns, arranging groups of Focus 12, so that's the most common, arranging groups of those people to build holograms themselves, and generally enhancing brain function. So there's no specific idea of the CIA found this and they want to use it to see the future. They just wanted to see what it would do to people's brains. They were curious, I think, as most people would be if you hear this stuff. So there's all these public available documents on Internet Archive, Monroe Institute, and then, as I said, there is actually the tapes, not only on the Internet Archive, but on Spotify, on real playlists on Spotify. So I thought, why be boring and just talk to you about all this when I can try them myself? So I decided to give the Gateway experience a go.
This is the first step along your path to a gateway beyond which is discovery, your own discovery of reality, of truth, of who and what you are. Now a simple preparation. Because of the special audio techniques used, it's important that certain sounds reach your right ear and others your left ear. To be sure of this, you should be hearing my voice in your right ear at this moment. If you are not hearing my voice in your right ear, turn your headphones around now so that you are hearing my voice in your right ear. Now, as you listen to the sound of oceans,
for track 1, I thought a quiet room in the library would be a good idea. This was a mistake. I tried listening to it in the library. It involved some techniques like the energy bar tool, putting your thoughts into a box of energy, and I felt fairly ridiculous trying this shit in the library. So for wave 2, I chose a much better option. I tried it here in my room.
Well, now that you are indeed on the threshold of a wave of change, it seems like a good idea to bring up a few points of interest, of knowns instead of beliefs or hopes. First of all, these exercises are only tools for you to learn and use. As such, they do not create change in you. Only you can change you. With these tools, you can effect many changes all under your control.
Yes, it went better. You were able to make use of the tools. It takes a while. Most of the tapes are over 30 minutes, but it did kind of work. My brain felt a little different. I mean, look, I'm going to update this video when I've done all of the waves, all of the tracks, but my conclusions are, they never said it was going to bring you magic abilities. It doesn't bring you magic abilities, but it's kind of cool. Like, it's kind of good meditation. It's kind of good, like, therapy, putting thoughts into a box, I guess. And it's kind of cool. Like, the sounds are cool. It's fun. It's exciting. It's interesting. But it's not going to bring you secret abilities. I'm sorry to say. This video may disappoint you, but you cannot get secret manifestation techniques from the CIA. Devastating, I know. But as devastating that is, I still think they're onto something. So I'm going to keep listening. And if I get magic manifestation abilities from the CIA, you'll be the first to know about it.